Welcome to today's National Organization on Disability Virtual Learning Forum, a look inside the 2017 Disability Employment Tracker and Leading Disability Employer Seal. Your presenters for today's program are Carol Glazer, President of the National Organization on Disability, and Sue Meirs, Chief Operating Officer at the National Organization on Disability. Audiocast quality is subject to your equipment, available bandwidth, and Internet traffic. If you experience unsatisfactory audio quality, please use the telephone dial-in option provided in your confirmation and reminder emails. If you have called in, operator assistance is available by pressing #. You may send questions at any time using the Q&A window located in the lower left corner of the presentation window. Just type in your question at the bottom of the Q&A window and press Enter on your keyboard, and press Ask to send your question. A question and answer session will follow the presentation. I'll now turn the call over to Carol Glazer. Please begin.
Good afternoon. Hello, and welcome to NOD's Virtual Learning Forum on the benefits of taking the 2017 Disability Employment Tracker and how to use the tracker to your best advantage. I'm Carol Glazer, President of NOD. I'm joined by Sue Meirs, NOD's Chief Operating Officer. We're very pleased you could join us today. We have a good presentation with a lot of valuable information and data to share. We also have time at the end of the session to answer all of your questions. Looking at the roster of who's on the call, I see we have several of our Corporate Leadership Council members. I'd like to just call them out by name: Abbott, Anthem, Colgate-Palmolive, CSC, Capital One, Johnson & Johnson, Kellogg, Kiewit, L'Oreal, Merck, Monsanto, Prudential, PJM, Sony, and Xerox. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for being part of the Corporate Leadership Council. Those of you who aren't, I'd encourage you to learn more about it and how you can become a member and reap the benefits. Today we'll discuss how your company can take the first step and determine your current state of disability and veteran inclusion with the Disability Employment Tracker. The tracker is a tool that NOD developed in collaboration with Sirota and the Viscardi Center. I think Viscardi's with us on the call. Greetings. And the 2017 Disability Employment Tracker offers company a quick, free, and confidential assessment of how your company's employment policies and practices stack up in 6 key inclusion areas. All of this uses unique and valuable benchmarking data that we have collected. The tracker is now in its 4th year, updated to keep up with the latest trends in disability workforce inclusion. You'll learn today how you can assess your firm's current practices to recruit, onboard, and retain people with disabilities and veterans, and how you can identify areas of success and opportunities to advance. We'll also explore how to turn your tracker results into an action plan with our Disability Inclusion Accelerator, and we'll highlight the additional benefits available to companies that participate in the tracker, including qualifying for the 2017 NOD Leading Disability Employer Seal and the Diversity Inc. Top 50 Companies for Diversity. Finally, we'll look at results from the 2016 Disability Employment Tracker, and those results shed light on performance trends from all of last year's participants. I'd like to highlight several important data points about disability as an element of diversity. As I look at the list of who's on this, any of you could probably be giving this presentation as easily as I could. So we'll do this very briefly. People with disabilities represent the largest minority group in the United States, 57 million today. Just 70% are born with our disability. The other 80% acquire those disabilities later in life. And that's a trend we can expect to continue, even accelerate as baby boomers age into disability, many of them while still in the workforce. The majority of people with disabilities have an invisible disability, such as epilepsy or diabetes, migraine headaches. And the minority have a visible disability, wheelchair user, assistive animal, etc. I'd like to share with you key facts about why disability and veteran inclusion matters to your company. Here again, I'm sure this is just going to be a review to companies who already know these things. People with disabilities are the largest diversity group in the country. Approximately 20% of the U.S. population has a disability. Nearly 80% of the 30 million working-age Americans with disabilities are not employed, yet the majority, and we know this from research, can and want to work. We also know that changes to U.S. Department of Labor regulations of Section 503 and VEVRA set workforce targets for federal contractors. We also know that disability inclusion is proven to enhance corporate culture and increase engagement across the broader workforce, and that 87% of consumers would prefer to give their business to companies that hire people with disabilities. A little bit about NOD for those of you who are new, a quick overview. We're a nonprofit that promotes the full participation and contributions of America's 57 million people with disabilities in all aspects of life. We have a 35-year track record as a leading authority on disability with a board of committed senior corporate leaders and professional staff with decades of experience working with employers, the military, disability organizations, researchers, and policymakers. Today, we focus exclusively on increasing employment for people with disabilities, especially in major companies, by setting standards for top performance by employers and helping you to achieve that performance. To do this, we have a suite of professional services tailored to meet your unique workforce needs, together with our Corporate Leadership Council, as I mentioned, with membership now numbering nearly 40 companies. And we've helped some of the world's most recognized brands to become more competitive in today's economy by attracting a diverse talent pool that includes people with disabilities. Finally, we also conduct research, among other ways, through the Disability Employment Tracker that employers take to benchmark your practices and progress in disability inclusion. And you'll hear more from Sue about how the tracker measures key success factors in disability employment. NOD and Sirota updated each year with the latest and best practices based on the needs of large corporate employers. Sue, over to you.
Thanks, Carol. The Disability Employment Tracker offers your company a free, quick, and confidential way to determine your current state of disability and veteran performance, the first step to understanding where your company stands today. The tracker measures how your disability and veteran employment policies and practices compare to all companies participating in the 2017 survey across 6 key inclusion aspects, allowing you to identify areas of strength and opportunities to improve. The survey was developed in conjunction with NOD's employment experts in partnership with the Viscardi Center, NBDC, and Sirota Consulting, with input from corporate leaders. We offer the tracker every year, and each year we refresh it to reflect the evolving needs of employers and the latest leading practices in disability inclusion gained through NOD's professional services consulting engagements with our client companies, input from corporate members of NOD's Board of Directors and members of NOD's Corporate Leadership Council, and our close observation of the marketplace. Companies can re-enroll in the tracker annually to chart their progress year over year and demonstrate advances gained from launching or expanding disability and veterans inclusion initiatives. Typically, the tracker is completed by HR or D&I leaders. The 2017 tracker is open now, and you can start at any time. Just submit your responses by the March 1st deadline. After signing up for the 2017 tracker, you get instant access to begin the survey. There are about 80 questions, with the vast majority being yes, no, don't know. There is a section on veteran inclusion questions that is optional. We don't require any substantiating documents or evidence, and most participants complete the survey in just a few hours. Here you're looking at an excerpt of the actual online tracker survey, which includes questions like, my company has a specific hiring goal for people with disabilities, where the options are yes, no, don't know. Some questions, like number 9, recruiting personnel are formally trained on disability employment needs, have nested or sub-questions, which only appear if you respond yes to the parent question. Often participants reach out to us about question 9B. Recruiting personnel are required to attend annual disability employment training that exceeds 30 minutes in length, and wonder if by offering 30 minutes of general diversity training that includes disability topics, would that qualify as a yes? The answer is no. What we're really looking for here is 30 minutes worth of disability training. Now that could be part of a longer general diversity training session, but really we're looking for an indication of a dedicated effort to train your recruiters on disability inclusion and specific hiring techniques. We also get inquiries on question 8. My company has a disability inclusion careers webpage for job seekers. This question is not asking if you have a web page with information on applications or interview accommodations. What we're asking is whether your company has a dedicated web page encouraging candidates with disabilities to seek careers within your company. This type of web page functions broadly as a marketing and communication tool, and is typically housed within the main company website, as you would often see with a web page dedicated to company values or commitment to diversity. It may include information about your company's disability inclusive culture and commitment to disability employment, or share information on disability awards won, or stories of current employees with disabilities. The tracker looks at 6 aspects of disability inclusion that NOD's employment experts find are essential to success. So the topics covered are climate and culture, which includes ERGs, senior leadership support and disability commitment; talent sourcing, which includes disability training for recruiters, accessible applications and onboarding procedures; people practices like disability training for managers, mentoring programs, performance reviews; workplace and technology, so digital accessibility and building accessibility; strategy and metrics, which includes things like employee surveys, plans to improve, and audits for correcting course where needed. And the veteran employment section is optional and looks at organizational attitudes and policies and employee life cycle, including recruiting. After completing the tracker survey, you'll receive a Disability Employment Tracker Scorecard. You can expect to receive this in spring of 2017, or about 6 to 8 weeks after the March 1st tracker deadline. Your Disability and Veteran Inclusion Scorecard serves as a snapshot of your company's current disability and veteran performance. For each of the 6 key inclusion aspects, NOD provides a numeric score reflecting your company's performance in that area, and a benchmark score showing the average performance for all companies participating in 2017. Use this overview to quickly update senior leaders on where your company stands today and build support for growing or launching initiatives to improve in one or more key inclusion aspects. For each key inclusion aspect examined, for example, talent sourcing, you'll also find recommended leading practices from NOD's employment experts to help you advance. The Tracker Scorecard also includes a record of your responses. For companies re-enrolling, you'll also see your year-over-year response trend, and that's a good way to document your improvements over years. And finally, the scorecard shows trends drawn from the aggregate anonymized data of all participating companies, like gaps in diversity versus disability and performance, which we'll look at a little bit more later in this conversation. For those who participate in the tracker, you will certainly see where your practices stand against the benchmark of your peers. You'll understand some critical success factors in disability and veteran employment. In some cases where relevant, you will be able to show that you're taking some tangible steps towards meeting Department of Labor requirements. And we'll talk a little bit more later about the possibility of following it with a deep dive using NOD's Disability Inclusion Accelerator. Overall, data is rapidly transforming how employers talk about disability inclusion. More open and transparent discussions of disability are moving from taboo to mission critical. And as the old saying goes, you can't change what you don't measure. So we invite you to use the tracker benchmarks to assess your current disability and veteran employment practices and build your business case for change. What's more, by completing the tracker, you can opt to be considered for NOD's 2017 Leading Disability Employer Seal, which provides significant opportunities to enhance your brand in the broad marketplace as a preferred disability employer. Specific responses and scores are not shared, nor is the list of companies who didn't get the seal shared, but the seal is recognition of the top scoring companies. I'm sure that some of you on the call are also Diversity Inc. respondents and know that the tracker is a requirement for the top 50 companies for diversity. You will have the opportunity when taking the tracker to opt in to Diversity Inc. being informed that you have completed the tracker, but no scores or specific answers get shared. You can enroll now on NOD's website to get access to the tracker survey. Be sure to submit your responses before the online survey closes on March 1st and get your scorecard in the spring of 2017. The tracker survey was designed to be quick and easy. Nearly all the questions are yes, no, don't know. It is completely free and confidential. NOD will not disclose that your company enrolled in the tracker, nor will we ever share any of your company's specific scores or responses. By completing the tracker, you will have taken the first step by establishing your current state of disability and veteran inclusion with data. You can then take the second step with NOD's Disability Inclusion Accelerator and turn that data into an informed set of actions toward progress. The accelerator combines data from the tracker with NOD's deep consulting experience to build a plan to advance your company's inclusion initiatives. Our employment experts will meet with your team in person or virtually and take a deep dive into your company's results by examining your performance against benchmark scores for all of the tracker questions. Clients gain from NOD's expert recommendations on how to progress, informed by our 35 years of disability employment history and the dozens of consulting clients we've helped on their inclusion journey. During the accelerator briefing, our professional services consultants discuss your company's inclusion goals and develop a set of recommendations with short, medium, and long-term actions, customized for your organization and informed by your current state of performance. Finally, the accelerator also includes a playbook your team can use to build buy-in across the organization for new inclusion initiatives. All of the benefits of the Disability Inclusion Accelerator are available for a fee, but only for those who complete the tracker. Taking another look at the accelerator briefing, here's an example of some of the data that's included. Each accelerator is customized for the specific client, but one thing everyone gets is the answers and benchmarks for all of the questions on the tracker. The Disability Inclusion Accelerator provides a customized plan to improve upon your current inclusion performance and meet your individualized business goals. NOD's experts chart specific quick hits as well as medium and long-term actions to advance your inclusion initiatives. If you're interested in the accelerator, you can email tracker@nod.org. And now I'm going to turn it back to Carol to look at some of the trends revealed in the 2016 tracker survey.
Thank you, Sue. So we noted earlier that besides giving each company a distinct review of your own performance with more than 150 companies in our database, we can draw out some trends on policies and practices. So we wanted to just take a few minutes to share with you some of the trends that came out of the 2016 tracker. As we noted, we update the tracker every year with new questions, and those are based on emerging practices and research, which give us the information and the insight into the rapidly evolving nature of how companies are practicing disability and veteran inclusion. Again, to date, with that 150 companies, that goes back to 2014 when we debuted the tracker, and those companies represent over 4 million employees. The vast majority of companies are large, with 10,000 or more employees. On average, companies participating in the tracker employ 45,800 individuals. We expect to see 150 companies complete the tracker in 2017 alone, which represents a large increase since we debuted the tracker. In our pool of the nearly 100 companies that took the tracker in 2016, we see that half are Fortune 500 and 3/4 are federal contractors. There's broad industry representation. The typical respondent is a senior leader in either diversity and inclusion or HR. The 2016 data reflects an overall trend of increasing attention to disability inclusion. The percentage of affirmative responses has risen from 2014 to 2016, and the way the survey is constructed is the best practice answer is yes. So when we quote affirmative responses, we're showing the way companies are improving their performance. Again, we see a big jump from 2014 to 2015, with a slight leveling off in 2016, but that's because a considerably larger number of companies are in the database for 2016 than those that took the tracker survey in the previous year. And looking ahead, even as the number of tracker takers increases further, we still expect to see the affirmative response rate continue to rise based on what we know anecdotally from our work on the ground. However, even though disability is moving in a positive direction for companies with policies and resources in place, which are two good steps on the journey to being a good disability inclusive employer, we still see that disability lags behind other diversity segments. We see a 20% difference in the number of companies that have a disability employee resource groups, and we see fewer senior leaders publicly promoting disability initiatives than with other workforce segments. And we know from other research, including our Harris Interactive polls, that while a number of companies have diversity policies in place, far fewer have actual programs and practices to promote disability inclusion. So there's still a way to go. Our data show that while employers are changing their policies and their practices and changing the conversation, we still do have a long way to go before disability measures up to other diversity segments in corporate employment practice. And then finally, when it comes to recruitment onboarding, we consider training to be among the most important best practices, as Sue noted, in ensuring that there's a welcoming culture for new employees as well as for current employees with disabilities. But we see in the slide that while there's been significant improvement since the baseline in the rate of recruiters being trained on disability employment, there's still substantial room to do far better. And meanwhile, the accommodation process is explained on an employee's first day. Another best practice, but it's practiced by only about half of participating companies. With respect to veteran employment, less than a quarter of respondents report that they've reached the goal of having 7% of employees identify as veterans, despite high rates of tracking veteran status in the workforce. These class-wide trends in disability and veteran inclusion are examples of what you'll see in your own scorecard, which is another benefit available to those who complete the tracker survey. So that wraps up our presentation for today. I'd like to open the floor to your questions now. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can.
As a reminder, if you'd like to submit a question, please type in your question at the bottom of the Q&A window and click on the Ask button to submit.
Okay, just gathering some questions in here. First question that I see is, do you provide any analysis within specific industries? And the answer is, for up through last year, we did not do industry-specific analysis, generally because we didn't feel we had, a statistically significant concentration in each industry to draw conclusions from it. We are expecting a large number of respondents this year, and if we have enough data for that to be statistically significant, we will certainly share that information out.
Copy of the presentation.
A number of people have asked if we would share a copy of the presentation. Certainly, we'll be happy to distribute this to all the participants after this call. How can we get access to the tracker for previous years? We don't have it in an available format. Oh, that's a good question that I don't entirely have an answer to. Let me follow up with you after this call and see what we can provide that would be useful to you.
This is Carol. I think we may be able to access aggregate data. I'm not sure whether we can do it by question. I don't know that we can provide
Well, we can't provide
data.
all, I'm sorry, I thought that the question referred to the questions, not the answers. But, okay, we'll figure it out after. No, there's, someone asked if you have to have a certain number of employees to fill out the tracker. Absolutely not. Any employer can fill out the tracker. It doesn't matter for-profit, non-profit, size. It's not meant for individual people, but any employer, I think, can benefit from answering. I do think for those smaller employers on the line, you might realize that some of the things that are best practices probably are outside of your scale, and I think that's just useful to keep in mind as you're doing it. Okay. Someone asked a question about a specific tracker question, number 49, that asks about a company's plan for improving disability inclusion practices. And it's for those that haven't gotten to that point in the tracker yet, it's a series of options with yes, no, don't know on each of them. And the question is, if something already exists, like an employee resource group, do you answer yes there, or do you answer no there because it already exists? You will have the opportunity to answer yes to having an employee resource group elsewhere in the tracker survey. So it's one of the earlier questions. And therefore, when you reach that question on the do you have a plan, the answer should be no, because it already exists. Good question. Let's see. I have a question. Is the 503 7% level a benchmark or a quota? I would say it's a goal. It's neither a benchmark nor a quota. So the requirement says that that federal contractors must target 7% employment. It does not say that in order to be compliant, you have to have reached it, but you have to be asking, giving your employees the opportunity to self-identify, and there's some specifics around that. You have to target 7%, and you have to show that you're taking actions to try and move in that direction.
What the Department of Labor said specifically in response to that question is that you cannot be sanctioned for not having a 7% workforce participation rate, but you can be sanctioned for not trying.
Right. And I only wish, per someone else's question, that it was a requirement of the Department of Labor to complete the tracker. It's not a requirement of the Department of Labor to complete the tracker. I just think it's useful in terms of, if you were to be audited, if you're a federal contractor and were to be audited, and they said, well, what steps did you take to try and improve your disability inclusion? And one of the things that you could point to is I took the tracker survey and looked at the results on where we needed to improve. So that's all that we meant by helping you meet your requirements there.
There is a question, Sue, about what information we share publicly.
Okay, that's a good question. The only information that we share publicly is, first of all, we announce, of course, publicly the SEAL winners. So when you fill out the tracker, you have the option to be considered or not considered. Although I will say we also don't share the companies that did not win the SEAL. So it is only the winners that get announced. We share no company-specific answers. We will, just like we shared in this webinar, show some of the aggregate trend data. We will share that, but never company-specific answers.
Question about whether the 7% applies to every job category or overall average, and the answer is every job category.
Someone is asking a question about There's a question in the tracker about whether your website features images, videos, stories of people with disabilities in the workplace. Actually, I mean, yeah, the question says LGBT people in the workplace. The tracker says people with disabilities in the workplace. It's not about, yes, sometimes there are images that specifically portray people for those that have visible disabilities. Of course, a lot, as Carol talked about earlier, a lot of disabilities are not visible. So in terms of answering that question, if you also have stories about people in your workplace that mention their disabilities, that also counts. The goal of that question is to indicate whether a sort of candidate with a disability would look at your website and feel like they were reflected there. Can you talk a little more on the downward trend of disability ERGs? Why was this? There was not actually a downward trend in the number of companies having ERGs. It was like literally one number down over 1 year, and I think it just reflects a difference in the population that took the tracker 1 year to the next. It was not a significant trend. It was not a statistical trend down.
As we noted, the numbers between last year and the previous year do show a slight decline, but it's really a function of a much larger number of pool of companies that took the tracker than any other variable. And so we had a slight downward just because of greater number of companies reporting. We don't expect that to continue because we're seeing an overall upward trend that is so positive that we expect that to override any number of increases in tracker takers.
I have a question here. Does the leading disability employer seal take into account a company's performance on the tracker in previous years? And the answer to that is no. The seal is awarded it will be based on just the 2017 tracker data. Okay. Does NOD ever bring together the companies who have taken the tracker to share best practices and challenges? Yes and no. NOD's Corporate Leadership Council is a member. We didn't really talk about it on today's call because the tracker was the purpose of the call, but we have a Corporate Leadership Council that is meant exactly as a sort of peer information sharing network, and the council gets together virtually a bunch of times a year and in person 3 times a year for roundtables and panel discussions to share best practices, see what's on everybody's mind, and make sure that NOD is sort of helping people on their journey. Next question, Carol?
We have a question that says, it's a great question. Question is for number 7. When you say hiring goal, do you mean target or intent? That's a great question because oftentimes companies will have informal targets that for a whole host of reasons are just simply not appropriate to publish and make part of the public record. So, but that isn't the same as intent either. So I think we have to let you be the judge of what a target means, but typically it means that somewhere there is a quantitative goal that is discussed at the manager level that shows you're trying to make forward progress. Intent is great, but if there's nothing quantitative that's ever been discussed, it's very hard to show. It's a great question.
Where can I find the list of dates for Corporate Leadership Council and how can we participate? I have already agreed that we'll send out this presentation to participants after the webinar. We will send with it the Corporate Leadership Council calendar and more information on how to join the Corporate Leadership Council for those who are not members. Okay. Do we have any more questions coming in? Oh, here's one. Are the seal winners ranked? And the answer to that is no. Either a company just is a seal winner. There's not the number one best seal winner and the number two seal winner. So all seal winners are considered equal.
How are recipients for the seal determined? One question is about whether you receive additional points on the percentage of people with disabilities in your workforce.
So the seal determination is it's based on all of the questions in the tracker. So the same scoring that gives you your aspect scores and the benchmarks is used on the seal. I will say that we do also apply an overlay of the percentage of employees with disabilities. So in 2016, the floor was companies that did not have at least 1% of employees with disabilities were not eligible for the seal, and we do expect to have a similar criteria this year.
You want to talk about how the best performers are identified for the seal?
Sure. I think it sort of gives an indication of how the tracker how just filling out the tracker can be useful to you. We're not putting trick questions in there. If we're asking if you do something in the tracker, generally speaking, it's considered good if you do it. And so affirmative answers are generally scoring points. The weighting is based on our consulting expertise of what is most likely to have an impact on the culture of a company. And so those weightings are used to take all of the questions in the tracker and come up with the score for the seal.
Corporate responsibility efforts?
No, there are no questions in the tracker this year that are broadly about CSR or the corporate responsibility efforts. The tracker is very specifically focused on the employment life cycle and the experience of the applicant and employee. So no, we don't ask questions about philanthropic efforts or community engagement beyond the employment questions.
It's great questions going on today.
Yeah.
That's an excellent question. It's something we ought to think about because I think we know from our own experience that companies who think about disability as part of their philanthropy tend to be much more thoughtful about their own workforce. And so thank you for asking that question, and it's something that we will incorporate into Tracker 5.0 in 2018.
Yeah. We have a question about Diversity Inc. and the fact that we said that the results are not shared with Diversity Inc. The Diversity Inc. requirement is that you complete the tracker, not that you have a certain score on the tracker or that you say yes to certain questions, although there are also a couple of disability questions within the Diversity Inc. survey. The purpose is that you have looked at and have an assessment of your disability inclusion performance right now, and sort of where you stand against others, recognizing that that does not mean that you necessarily are committed to improving or that you stand above others, but just that at least you are looking at and seeing where you stand today. Someone asked, have any of the organizations that completed the survey in 2016 begun to track the productivity of people with disabilities because they understand the emerging power that people with disabilities represent as employees and consumers? That is an awesome question that I would say I don't know from tracker takers how many are looking at that productivity data. What I will say is more from our consulting work that we do know that a number of our clients and companies that we work with are doing that, right? So specifically those that have done a higher engagement, have hired a specific set of people with disabilities or have created a hiring program for people with disabilities are looking where possible at whatever metrics apply to that work and the work that they have employed people to do. and look at it as a confirmation that the effort was worth doing. So things like turnover, safety ratings, productivity ratings, absenteeism, like those things generally will get measured as a result of any hiring engagement. Disability hiring is part of diversity hiring. At any point, is this tracker going to be combined with the diversity tracker? It is certainly part of diversity hiring. I think there's always room to have a specific questionnaire, just like there's more than one dominant LGBT questionnaire out there in addition to having broad diversity. So I don't know that we would at a certain point say, oh, let's just fold this in. But I will certainly say today, looking today at sort of the state of diversity broadly, disability is really still in the much more nascent stages of being considered an important segment of diversity. I would say even 7 or 8 years ago, very few companies even included disability in their statement of diversity, of who they considered part of a diverse population. So at this point, and certainly for the next number of years, I would think we would want to really look at it with a different lens than diversity broadly, which includes, for many industries, gender and certainly ethnic diversity.
NOD has a very close working relationship with Diversity, Inc. We actually advised on there's a small number of disability questions on the current Diversity, Inc. survey, and we helped Diversity, Inc. develop those questions. And we discussed at that time with Diversity, Inc. The very question that somebody just raised, and shouldn't we consolidate this to make it easier on corporate America? We all decided, for the reasons Sue mentioned, that it would be important to start with a disability exclusive survey to really get companies thinking about this separate and apart and distinct from the rest of your diversity policies. But as Sue mentioned, it is entirely possible over time that as disability becomes an increasing part of diversity, that we may look for ways to make it more efficient and make life easier for all of you who are in the position of answering these many surveys. We are keenly aware of the amount of time that it takes when you add up all of the different surveys that you're taking, and ever sensitive to that. So it appears we don't have any other questions, so we'll wrap up the Q&A right now. But if you do have questions, please feel free to email us at tracker@nod.org. If you have any other inquiries, we will be sending out this deck, as we noted. And again, we encourage all of you to take the first step today and complete the Disability Employment Tracker. The simple web form is available at www.nod.org/tracker. And you'll receive instant access to begin the online survey. And within the survey, again, you can opt to be considered for the 2017 Leading Disability Employer Seal. Just submit your completed questionnaire by March 1st to receive your free scorecard. Again, to date, 150 companies across virtually every industry sector have decided to measure their performance with the tracker. Start today, and you too will gain a data-rich snapshot of where your company stands and how your performance compares to your peers. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope it's been a valuable session for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's National Organization Disability Virtual Learning Forum. Thank you all for attending.